Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. Today is Monday, March 30th, and it's about 10:30 in the morning. This is Sewing Room Episode 2. My name is Mrs. Kelly. I teach music at the Morse School, and I'm making videos, not just about music, about what I do outside of the classroom and in my home, about being creative. So hi, everybody. Welcome back. Episode 1, if you haven't seen it yet, I introduced a dress I was going to make over the weekend, and I shared a knitting update. So there is no knitting update. It's been sitting in the same place as last week. I haven't knit at all. I've been busy sewing. And I still want to finish my sweater, and when I see it sitting there, there's no, remember UFO, unfinished object, so my sweater is a UFO, but there is no UFO police coming telling me you have to knit. So it can wait. I have time. I might go back to it today because I get really into sewing over the weekend. And I was talking about making, hold on, where's the pattern? The hinterland dress, and I was going to use my vintage fabric. And I actually changed my mind. I saved the vintage fabric because I was wrong when I thought that I should use that as a practice and use the stuff from the store for the real one. And I realized that the stuff from the thrift store I can't replace. So I should practice on the stuff I got at the store, because I can always go back to the store. They have bolts and bolts of it at the fabric store. But that really cool vintage piece I won't be able to replace. So I didn't make the dress out of the vintage piece. I made it out of the different one, and there it is hanging on the door. I'm going to get to that in a second. Yeah, I finished it. It's a finished object. Okay, while I'm talking, oops, I dropped my samples. I want to go back and talk about my iron for a second because it scared the bejeepers out of me the other day. Okay, so if you missed episode 1, I was talking about my cool iron where when it's actually up off the, it's not on, by the way, so I'm not going to burn myself. It's up off the ironing board. It has its own little feet. Oop, they just went in, that hold it up. So when you're ironing, this thing's heavy, okay? And when I set it down and I'm done ironing, it goes back up on its own. Okay, so, but there are some times when I was pressing, which I'm going to talk about in my new project in a minute, where I really wanted the iron to stay down to press something open, and every time I would move my fingers, it would pop back up. So it does have a switch on the back where you can turn the iTouch off and on. It's going up and down because I keep moving my hand. So the other day I was like, you know what? I turned the iron off, and I turned this off because I wanted to use it to hold something down that kept falling off my ironing board. So I turned it off, and I left it there. And then I'll come back in a minute and tell you what happened. You'll figure it out. Okay, so I made my hinterland dress out of this orange linen. Try not to let it get blown up by the light. And here was the booklet of all the instructions. Okay, I'm not going through everything I did, but I do want to talk about a mistake. One of the reasons I did the practice bodice, where is that? Here it is. Okay, the designer recommended the bodice was the top part, doing a practice bodice out of muslin, which is inexpensive, off-white fabric. So here's and I was like, oh, that came out really good. And I tried it on and I liked it. And I thought, okay, I'm getting blown out by the sun. So there it is. It looks like a vest because I haven't put the dress on, and I didn't finish the button front, but I did practice the finishing techniques on the neckline and the armholes. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm ready to go. So save that for something else. So I got out the orange linen, I washed it, I dried it, and I ironed it, and I cut out, first I have to tell you about my mistake that I made on the practice one. Here's the first pieces I cut. I cut out the pattern, and then I cut out the fabric, and here's what I cut out for the top, because the pattern piece looks like I didn't know. I'd never made one of these before. I don't know if you can even see the lines. I cut this whole triangle out. Here. Okay, and I didn't know until I went to go sew it together. Even though I read the directions, I didn't realize that there's supposed to be fabric here. This is just shows you where you're going to sew, and that you should actually cut it out this shape So you have that little thing sticking out the side so that you actually have the fabric to do the shaping. And so what I did was I actually cut out all the fabric that you would use to make the dart. So epic fail. Luckily it was on the practice material. Okay? That's why you practice. So I had cut out the pattern wrong. But luckily, like I told you, I save everything, and I actually was saving all of the scraps from when I don't want to mix that up, scraps from when I cut the pattern out, because this is really nice paper I can use for art journaling. That could be another series, art journaling. So I actually had the pile of scraps, and I dug out the little, what was it, a rectangle or a diamond shaped, this little thing, and I taped it back on. Whew. Okay. So that, did you see that? It freaked me out the other day. Scared the bejeepers out of me. After a few minutes, it decides it's going to stay up, and it goes up on its own. And the other day, it was so quiet in here, and I was doing something, and all of a sudden, and I got so scared. Anyway, so that was my iron. Okay, so back to my project. So I had to recut the fabric, and I figured out how to do the shaping the correct way. Okay, and it came out just right. And I might even use this for a future project, add a skirt onto it, or I might use it as a lining for the other one. So I'm about to show you my dress, but before I get there, I want to talk about fraying. Okay, see the edge? It frays. If you leave the this is called the raw edge. Okay, so when I talk about a few things coming, I'm going to talk about the raw edge. So that's the raw edge of the fabric. And while I'm here talking about the raw edge, where's the blue one I just had? This is the fabric of my next, one of the fabrics of my next project that's also frays a lot. Okay, you can see it fraying, and it's all, if you don't do something about it, eventually it's all going to, could conceivably keep pulling apart, pulling apart, pulling apart. Okay, that's how cut off jeans work. Cut your jeans off, and then the ends eventually get all frayed because some of the strings fall out. So when you're, okay, let's get to the dress. You have to do something to protect all the raw edges, excuse me. And so I had to do an, on the outside of every piece, before I sewed it together, most of the pieces that were going to have a raw edge showing on the inside, I had to do a little zigzag stitch all the way around before I put them together so that they wouldn't fray. Talk about that more in a minute. Okay, let's get to the finished product. I'm going to move my chair out of the way so that I don't trip over it. There's the hit preview coming up. Oh yeah, preview, silk scarves. Okay, hold on, don't let me get distracted. You know how easy that is. Okay, so now I'm going to swing this over a little bit so I can show you the dress. There we go. Okay. So here is my finished product. Didn't it come out nicely? Okay, my hinterland dress in my kind of like an orangey cantaloupe color. I didn't put buttons. I didn't do buttonholes and buttons. I decided I sewed it shut most of the way and just left a little bit here, and you could put a button. I might still add some. I haven't decided. And on the back I did put in the ties, and you can see all of my edges are finished. There's no raw edges there. I'm going to show you how I'm doing that on my next project. Okay, and the arms and stuff, the binding. Okay, I want to talk about another mistake I made while I have it here up close. There was one, when I first had those pieces, I wanted to talk about the fabric is really light and sheer. You can probably see my hand through it. It's a really sheer, light fabric. So when I was over here ironing and ironing, the pieces stretched out a little bit after I cut them. And this one is actually bigger than my sample in the muslin, even though I used the same pattern pieces. Okay, because the fabric stretched out. I didn't, lesson learned. I probably ironed it too hard. I don't know, but it came out bigger. Another thing that I didn't realize is a thing called stay stitching. When you first cut the pattern pieces out, right along this edge and around these raw edges, you do this thing called stay stitching, which helps it not like stretch out and stuff. I had no idea that the stay stitching was going to be visible on the finished product. I thought it was going to be hidden. So now I want to show you, and it's a little embarrassing. I'll show you my mistake. Okay. You can see here this stitching. Look how nice and neat that is. I knew that was going, I did that consciously at the end, and that came out really good. Really well. But if you look closer and you see that inside one, look at it. It's a wreck. It's all over the place. Because I was kind of sloppy when I did that. Because I did, oh, look at it. Oi. I didn't realize it was going to show. So another lesson learned is in this pattern that stay stitching ends up being a decorative stitch on top. Now luckily, as soon as I put it on and walk away, you mostly see the top stitching where I did the binding around the neck. Thank goodness. Okay, and the length, I have not hemmed it yet. One thing I talked about in part 1 was the end is still just the raw edge. Now you're going to notice, you can see it there, try to focus on it. There we go. I did a little zigzag stitch around the bottom for now, just so that it doesn't fray too much. And actually, I might even just leave it and let it fray naturally. It will only fray up to the zigzag. It won't unravel all the way. Okay, so that's, but, so, now let me step back. Okay. I haven't decided if I'm going to keep it long like this, or when I hem it, if I decide to make it a little shorter and more into like a sundress. So, project number 1 is actually done. I'm going to hang it up and talk about project 2. Okay, so then I got a new pattern which show you might look like kind of the same thing. Actually, maybe I'll end this video and do episode 3 with my new pattern. I'll just, because this is already up to 12 minutes. So we'll just call this Hinterland Dress Part 2. And I'll give you a preview for my next one, which I'm going to finish today. Here's what I'm making now. Try not to get a glare on it. There we go. Ooh. This is the one I'm using all my silk scarves for. So that'll be my next video, which I'll make in just a minute, but I'm going to separate these. So thank you for tuning in to Sewing Room Episode 2, Hinterland Dress completed, finished object. And now I'm still really into sewing, moving on to my Arabella dress. Have a great day, everybody. I'm going to make the next one in a few minutes. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and thank you for watching if you're still here. All right, bye for now.